Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
The Hemp Show.
Hi, my name is Eric Hurlock.
And I'm Sophia Kurzius. Welcome back. So on last week's show, we mentioned that the hempsters of the world were making their yearly pilgrimage to NoCo.
Yeah, it started out over a decade ago as the Northern Colorado Hemp Expo, but now everyone just calls it NoCo.
And this was the 11th annual NoCo?
Yeah, and it was the first one that I've missed since 2022. But as I threatened to do on last week's show, I called up some of my favorite hemp people who were at the show. And so that's what today's show is going to be. It's not like a recap of NoCo, but sort of a collage of perspectives.
Who did you talk to?
12 people in all: J.J. Johnson, Kelly Burke, Ken Meyer, Morris Beagle, Joy Beckerman, Dion Holmquist, Ken Elliott, Gene Lotus, Chris Fonts, Andrew Bish, and Greg Wilson.
Wow, okay. Sounds like a party.
It really was. And we'll get into all of that. But first, let's take a quick sponsor break. This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company that's providing innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. Today's show is also made possible with support from Forever Green, distributors of the KP4 hemp cutter. Introducing a revolution in hemp harvesting, setting a new standard for harvesting quality, speed, and efficiency, the KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. Easy to maintain and designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting. The KP4 hemp cutter, available only at hempcutter.com. Today's show is also made possible with support from the National Hemp Association. If you're in the fiber and grain hemp space, you should know about the National Hemp Association. Industrial hemp is rooted in farms and built for industry, and NHA is working to build supply chains, support rural development, and push for the policy changes that fiber and grain producers need. Learn more and get involved at nationalhempassociation.org. Okay, welcome back. So this episode, like we said in the beginning, is less of a recap of the NoCo event itself. It's a collage of voices, and it's kind of a recap of some of the issues that are at play in the industry today. And how those issues get resolved, it's going to determine the future of the industry. And listening to these interviews, it keeps coming up again and again, this confusion about the word hemp. So before we go any further, we thought it might be helpful to take a short detour into the history of the word itself.
Because language matters, and the battle for the word hemp isn't just about marketing. It's about power, policy, and who gets to define the future of this plant.
Exactly. All right, so the 2018 Farm Bill didn't just legalize hemp, it redefined it. Legally, at least. It created this very specific threshold. Any cannabis sativa plant with less than 0.3% Delta-9 THC is now hemp. But that one definition, narrow as it was, blew the doors wide open for a different kind of hemp industry.
And suddenly the word hemp was being slapped on gummies, vapes, sodas, who knows what else?
Yeah, but here's the thing. That shift didn't start in 2018 with the Farm Bill. The groundwork for that was laid years earlier, back even before 2011. Chris Boucher and some other folks started importing CBD from Europe. And they wrote legal opinions saying how hemp CBD was federally legal because it wasn't mentioned in the Controlled Substances Act. So that's when the word hemp first started getting hitched to cannabinoids, strategically but quietly.
So the co-opting began before the Farm Bill, but 2018 is when the government put its stamp on it. One definition to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them.
Exactly. All of a sudden, hemp meant anything with low THC, no matter what part of the plant it came from, flower, extract, isolate. If it met that 0.3% rule, it got to be called hemp. That's when the word really lost its roots.
But the word hemp didn't start in 2011 or 2018. It's been around for what, over 1,500 years?
Yeah, at least. In Old English, it was hennep, spelled with that cool little ash character. It's like an A and an E smashed together. And it always referred to the fiber plant, not the resin, not the flower, just the stalk, the seed, and the bast fiber.
And before hennep?
You can trace it back even further. Proto-Germanic, Hanapis, Proto-Indo-European, Canab, Greek, cannabis, Latin, cannabis, Russian, konoplaya. Across all those languages, across centuries, the meaning holds. The industrial plant, used for rope, sailcloth, seed oil, not synthetics, not psychoactives.
That kind of semantic stability is rare, right? Most words evolve or flip meaning over time.
Exactly. Like, look at the word awful. It used to mean awe-inspiring, or nice, which meant foolish. But hemp has always meant hemp, tangible, useful, agricultural.
And now here we are with cannabinoid marketers claiming the word like they invented it.
That's the rub. The only reason they get to use the word hemp legally is because the Farm Bill bundled everything under 0.3% THC into one bucket. But historically, culturally, linguistically, they don't have a leg to stand on.
So if we're drawing lines in the sand, it's pretty clear. Fiber and grain folks are standing on 5,000 years of human history. Cannabinoids are standing on a 6-year legal loophole.
Yeah, there you go. Hemp belongs to hemp, and the word itself is the evidence. All right, so let's jump in. The first person I talked to was J.J. Johnson. He's a hemp educator living in Alabama now, but when I first met him a few years ago, he was living in Texas. At NoCo, he was an MC on one of the stages, and he's got a great perspective on things.
So for me, I'm a military dude. I see things black and white. It's
Okay.
not blurry for me personally, but I see everyone's confusion. I see everyone's issues, and I just do my best to try not to be, one side or the other too much, because I understand both sides and I also understand the middle, as well. Listening to some of the OGs in the space and looking at how things were originally written, hemp was never meant to get people high. That's not my personal opinion. That's just me stating, the black and white facts. And because of the way some language was written in the Farm Bill, whether it was on purpose or not, it allowed certain elements to be able to wiggle their toes in the door. And people have made a lot of money from that. And a lot of people have been helped because of that loophole. And now they're wanting to go back and close that loophole. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, you can't do that because we're already helping a lot of people out.
Right. Do you think the confusion around intoxicating cannabinoids is muddying the waters for like the industrial applications, for fiber and grain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And I'm observing a lot of those conversations firsthand right now, because nobody is saying intoxicating cannabinoids don't have a place. Nobody is saying intoxicating cannabinoids don't have their place. All they're saying is that stuff shouldn't be included in fiber and grain, because, we're talking about a farm bill, right? Or farmers, So, farmers are interested in the fiber and grain. They're not necessarily interested in the cannabinoid space. So it is causing some confusion currently.
Right.
And everyone wants to say, and this is something that came to me last night, everyone wants to say that we're all in the same boat. We all want the same thing. But my question is, are all the oars pointed in the same direction as we're rowing?
So these themes sort of dominate the conversation. What is hemp? Who gets to claim it? But I also began to hear rumors.
Well, so here's something that's different, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but I think here, probably within the next 30 to 45 days, there's going to be a pretty top-down heavy push of saying this is the way it's going to be. And then when that top-down push happens, and I mean from the top.
Intriguing.
Oh, just wait. This is fascinating, and we're going to hear more about this throughout the show, about a certain session that took place Thursday morning at NoCo. But still, the conversation seems to always come back to this confusion that cannabinoids and intoxicating cannabinoids cause for the folks on the fiber and grain side of things, the side which practically everyone agrees has the most long-term potential to build the industry, rebuild manufacturing, improve soil health, reduce carbon emissions, revitalize rural and small-town America, and provide a superfood ingredient to our diets.
But instead, it seems like there's a weird fixation on the chemical compounds found in the hemp flower.
Yeah, because that is also where the profit is found. The short-term profits are in the cannabinoids. Next, I called Kelly Burke from KIFCure in Illinois, and she said,
it's dominating the discussion. None of the policymakers seem to have a problem with industrial hemp for industrial purposes, but it's dominating the conversation. One of the points that I was standing up and saying is, in Illinois, probably 98% of the hemp grown in Illinois is grown by Kifcure. And
Wow.
that 2% is probably the cannabinoid market. But when you walk into policymakers' offices, it's all they can talk about. And I'm
Right.
like, this is not even happening here. Like, can we be focused on what is the overwhelming majority? But it's still such a key focus for them. So I think a big takeaway is, how are we going to work together to change the narrative? Because I think that there's just an overwhelming focus on it, regardless of it being even reality. And then I think another big focus that was discussed yesterday in one of the panels is that big liquor is looking at it and they want to roll in hemp beverages and gummies. And then if they use the improper language of saying food and beverage products, then are there implications to the grain industry if they're not careful with their language and words?
Then I called up Joe Hickey. He's definitely a hemp OG. He was the guy back in the 90s who convinced Woody Harrelson into planting hemp in Kentucky for the sole purpose of getting arrested. All documented in the film Hempsters Plant the Seed. Joe's optimistic, but he shares those same concerns about this fault line in the hemp space.
You know what? This year has really given me a lot of hope for the industry because it's more focused on fiber and grain. There's still a few cannabinoid folks around, and I'm not against cannabinoids. It's just not, I spoke with someone the other day and they were saying, well, how come you're against cannabinoids? I said, I'm not against cannabinoids. What I am for is the reality that cannabinoids are going to help 0.1% of American farmers, and hemp and grain is going to help 99.9% of the farmers. So where do you put your money?
That's the whole show right there, Joe.
Yeah. In a nutshell, that's it. I mean, if we're going to have a true hemp industry, it has nothing to do with cannabinoids. The corn industry doesn't have anything to do with the whiskey industry.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. But then I called up Ken Meyer. He's a processor up there in South Dakota, which has been one of the most prolific states for hemp production over the past few years, thanks in large part to the work that Ken, along with his cohorts in the South Dakota Industrial Hemp Association, John Peterson and Derek Doman, to name a few, they've spent the past several years traveling around the state to educate farmers, sometimes one farmer at a time, about the opportunities in hemp. Ken runs Complete Hemp Processing in Winfred, South Dakota.
And where's he at on the cannabinoid conversation?
It can be frustrating, especially if you've only been involved in grain and fiber in the industry and you go in to talk to policymakers in your state capital or in the nation's capital in DC, and they want to know, what are we going to do about intoxicating cannabinoids? And that's not why you came. And so you've got to kind of find a way to work around that. But that said, in my own experience representing my own state in those kind of discussions, I think by and large our South Dakota legislators understand very well the difference, and also our delegation in DC. So I don't think it's holding us back, in my opinion.
So it's less of an issue for him.
Yeah, and he's really optimistic about the new administration in Washington.
The America First push and the push for manufacturing here can be a great benefit to us in standing up processing and growing the hemp crop here, getting the local markets established. Complicated, of course, recently, at least in the short term, by the tariff situation for several reasons that we can talk about, of course.
After I talked to Ken, I called up the master of ceremonies himself, Morris Beagle. When I spoke to him Friday afternoon, he seemed to be in the eye of the hurricane, which I only say metaphorically because...
You remember how the weather was last year?
Gorgeous?
Exactly. And you know what? We've got the exact same thing.
Oh.
It's been sunny, nice. It's weather, temperature, it's all great. So that has set the tone, because as Estes is so pretty.
Right.
And we've got similar crowd that we did last year. The conference has been packed yesterday. Good turnout today. Expo started today.
Okay.
Good traffic on the floor. Good energy. All parts of the industry here. Lots of talking and collaborating, and it's been solid.
Sophia, do you remember Paul Benham?
From the hemp plastic company.
I think you had Paul on your show
Just a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so got them to get a booth and went over there with Kate Greenberg, the Commissioner of Agriculture here in Colorado, and Ian Sieb, who is the Director of Cannabis and Natural Medicine, and reports directly to Governor Polis. So we went and did a walkthrough of the expo hall.
I've met Kate Greenberg. She's been on the show a few times. Last year at NoCo, I took a selfie with her and the governor of Colorado. She's my favorite ag secretary. Well, after Russ Redding from Pennsylvania, of course.
What else did Morris have to say?
I asked about the rumors and the cautious optimism that some of the other folks had alluded to.
Well, it's a little early on. I think there will be a little more information in a couple weeks. But there's opportunities in Washington right now. So, we're looking at the Farm Bill. There's possibilities what's going to happen there, or if it's even going to happen this year. And then there's also kind of rumor mill that there might be executive order type situation that could free up a lot of the regulatory situation.
Where's that coming from? Where's that rumor coming from? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think maybe we touch base on that in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And maybe, off recording. So it's kind of it's a touchy situation at this exact moment.
Well, that's intriguing.
Yeah, it turns out all these rumors were generated in a panel discussion Thursday morning. It was moderated by Joy Beckerman, longtime hemp advocate, one of the OGs for sure. Do you remember when Gandalf fell off that bridge in Moria, the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and he had to fight the Balrog?
Yeah, and he reappeared 9 chapters later transformed. It sort of marked his transformation from a guide and a helper to a leader with greater wisdom and divine authority.
Exactly. Well, Joy's been through a lot lately. Anyway, Joy moderated the panel discussion.
Who was on the panel?
So we had attorney Bob Hoban on that panel, as well as attorney Jonathan Miller, who is general counsel to the U.S. Hemp Roundtable and its sister organization, the U.S. Hemp Authority. And we had Patrick Atagi, who is the CEO and president of NIHC, the National Industrial Hemp Council.
Okay, cool. And what was sort of the vibe of that conversation?
Well, the title of it was about key priorities for the Farm Bill. But because of just this gigantic, huge issue of the proliferation of intoxicating hemp derivatives in the market, that and my personal 35 plus years seasoned professional educated opinion being that all of those products need to be in medical and adult use versus the 3 panelists who believe that those products deserve some type of separate, all on their own regulatory framework. And I might even agree with them if it weren't for the fact that my personal opinion here, and frankly, the opinion of several other professionals experienced in these emerging fiber and grain industries, are that these products are an absolute scourge. And I will never back down from the fact that they are an absolute public harm risk. They just simply do not have a place in the regular stream of commerce.
And did you say that at all during the conversation?
As much as I have just great respect for at least 2 of those panelists, the reality is that I have to speak the truth. And I most definitely spoke that truth, and I spoke it very firmly because it is essential that folks are liberated from this. I just because it's a proverb we're all familiar with, I'll say this constant putting lipstick on pigs of a ridiculous argument and then parading these lipstick pigs in front of us as if these arguments have any validity or are addressing any of the fundamental, foundational, underpinning issues of this extremely important conversation. And I was absolutely determined that we're going to have that conversation at NoCo, and we're still having it.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for saying all of that, Joy, to me and to them in the room.
You got it. You got it. And I have to thank to my brother Cameron McIntosh. I'm happy to say that the three panelists there, we do have, at least certainly two of us, a great deal of love and mutual respect for each other. And so having said that, though, and we use all the tools available to us, boy, was it great to have a big, strong male, come in after I spoke my truth and validate the heck out of it. And Cameron McIntosh of America's Chambra came out during Q&A and just said, yo, I'm going to tell you about my reality. I agree with Joy. Thank you for saying this, Joy. And this is the reality of how this conversation and these products affect my real business. And in the end, there are so many things to say, and we can say them all or not in this wonderful conversation we're having.
Go for it. Say it.
But in the end, it's like, I have no problem with people getting high, but if you don't have a planet to get high on, then there is no point in this endeavor here. But here's the reality, brother. And these are the facts that are not spoken, yet they are the fundamental underpinnings of which I spoke. And that is, when we have this Delta 8 conversation, most of the products that we see out there are not even Delta 8. The amount of sophistication and quality control and infrastructure and instruments that it takes to actually achieve a nature identical molecule is absolutely expensive. It's not going to be achieved with bathtub gin and a beaker and a solvent or some caustic combination of solvents, of which reaction we even have no way to test for. So what is on the label is, for the most part of these products, whether it's HHC, THCP, THCO, any of these analog esters that really are not actually legal in real life, whether or not we defined the word derivatives, which is, I won't go on too much of a tangent here, but it's the Ninth Circuit who declared that these products were legal simply because we neglected to define the word derivatives in the 2018 Farm Bill. But in any event, whatever the alleged cannabinoid or analog ester isomer of tetrahydrocannabinol THC is being claimed on the label, for the most part, that's not actually what's in the product. So it is absolutely ridiculous. Second of all, let's pretend that there was THCP or whatever these crazy Frankenstein synthetically converted bastardized substances are. We don't have testing over a number of years on humans or even rodents to understand the impact of these substances in the human body. I mean, this is just straight up irresponsible and dangerous. And secondly, the claims that are being made and the absolute fraudulent misleading of an impressionable consumer who was being correctly led into the wonderful medicinal aspects of this industrial hemp through non-intoxicating cannabinoids that are a true public health revolution, such as cannabidiol. Having said that, the entire conversation has absolutely exhausted me. And the good news there is that I have gone right back to what brought me to hemp in the beginning 35 years ago, and that is fiber and grain and their absolute healing potential for the planet, for humanity, for animals, and the trillion-dollar industries that they will bring once infrastructure is developed, and the absolute regeneration and reinvigoration of the American farmer, small, medium, and large.
Amen to that, Joy.
Thank you, my brother. And thank you for letting me have the platform to say it. I love for us all to play nice. And when we did, we played very nice yesterday. But in that wanting to play nice, as I've watched the encroachment of this issue developed, I have not necessarily spoken my truth, because it's important that we stay a tribe and that all of these different organizations and nonprofits, that we focus more on where we agree. Having said that, it became absolutely obvious to me that we needed to have this an authentic conversation, because what's happening is completely inauthentic.
Wow. And this was just a Thursday at NoCo?
Yeah. I think that panel discussion really identified for people where the lines are.
Huh. Did she address the executive order rumors?
She did.
It's always fascinating because, again, having been, president of HIA, vice president of U.S. Hemp Authority, executive vice president of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, man, have I seen the sausage making at that federal Washington, D.C. level. And what is the reality is that the leaders of all the organizations and the leaders of whatever, business, and Bob Hoban is, a very prolific, successful businessman and, former attorney, he doesn't practice anymore. So the leaders of these organizations or these, successful businessmen, they all, I'm sure you'll be shocked to hear this, Eric, they all profess their special and unique relationships with big decision makers and lawmakers. They all do. So they all say that they have special information and that they really have the special relationship. So they really know. So Bob doing what he does, and this is not, again, unique to Bob. Every leader on that stage and leaders that aren't even here at NoCo say the same thing. So Bob says, he's got his in there and he's got the inside information. He didn't use that word, but that, read it between the lines. Okay. And so he's got some inside info that the Trump administration is going to do this, that, and the other thing. Again, I have heard it all before for years. Then Jonathan Miller will say, but the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, we have the inside connection and the inside, and this and that's going to go on, and it's going to happen through this other channel. And then NIHC will say the same thing because, they come from a big USDA DC background, and clearly Patrick Atagi has tremendous relationships there because he knows how to get the funding for all of the foreign marketing services. And he does a good job at that. But so all I am to tell you is I don't believe any of this inside stuff. And I also think, and I'm not a betting woman. Having said that, and I'm happy to be wrong if I'm going to be wrong, but I will tell you right now that I personally think that it is a glitter farting unicorn that we're going to have some magical, freely intoxicating public harm hemp derivatives because the FDA doesn't care. Executive order coming down. I think that is a glitter farting unicorn, and that these people believe what they want to believe because they are in this bubble of a balloon of an island, some weird vacuumous silo where they all believe their own bullshit.
Industrial hemp.
Wow, she's on fire.
That's putting it mildly.
So then who'd you talk to?
I talked to a woman that I had met at the opening ceremony last September at the Lower Sioux Hemp Campus in Minnesota. I got to know her a little bit more at the Goodness of Hemp Summit in Montana last October.
Yeah, so my name is Dion Holmquist, and I am the director of the Bio-Based Solutions Initiative with Mekoche Agriculture Development. And that's a 501c3 nonprofit located in Porcupine, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I'm originally from Chadron, Nebraska, but I started in the hemp industry in Colorado and just had this passion of working in that community because of Alex Whiteplume's story.
Who's Alex Whiteplume?
Alex Whiteplume is a Lakota man from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. In the late 90s, Alex and his family planted industrial hemp on tribal land. Hemp was legal under Oglala Sioux tribal law, but illegal under federal law at the time. In 2000, the DEA agents raided his crop and destroyed it, and he became the first person in the U.S. to be banned by federal court from growing hemp. Despite this, he became a symbol of resistance and a hemp hero, fighting for tribal sovereignty, sustainable agriculture, and economic independence.
Wow, what an inspiration.
That's a whole nother story to get into. But yeah, with our work with Mekoche Agriculture Development, it really allows me to continue my work and my passion, which is to bring different alternative solutions for heating and building materials. And I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir with the audience and all the great things, but really specifically for that community, one of the things that I'm tasked with is finding those alternative solutions for heating. And that's my primary focus right now. And so, that's really where, with the hemp, I've done everything from being out in the fields and the farms because I really wanted to learn from the ground up when the industry popped off here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. I've been in small scale labs, extraction, retail, really getting to see all sides of it, but nothing can take away my love for really being out in the field with the plants. That's where I love being.
But some recent changes by the leadership on the reservation have really thrown a wrench into the works at Pine Ridge, it seems.
A couple months ago, I had gotten called to go to a tribal council meeting where it was motioned for the hemp commission staff basically to not be funded anymore. And so what that has forced Mekoche Agriculture Development to do is for us to move, unfortunately, our research projects to Nebraska, right on the other side of the reservation boundary. But It is unfortunate that we can't do it on the reservation.
Did you ask her about Bob Hoban's optimism?
You mean, does she share that optimism?
I do in a weird way, because I think the approach that they're talking about taking with the current administration, almost, it's almost as if you got to make it sound like it is their own idea and it's great. And and being from Nebraska and with the large scale ag farmers out there, and just talking to my father-in-law the other day, and just his big take on it, just the soy, the soybeans, we aren't going to be able to grow those this year, and just the hit that people are taking. And people do want those alternative grain crops and rotational crops. And so I'm hoping that, that this is that time that it can be pushed forward. And I am grateful for everybody that's being a voice up there and pushing it forward.
Gratitude is the engine of love.
And love is the engine of the world. So I'm glad I had the chance to catch up with Dion, because from how I see it, you can't tell the story of hemp in America without talking about hemp on tribal land. Hemp is seen as a game changer for indigenous communities. Hempcrete, for instance, gives people on reservations almost immediate access to addressing their housing needs in a way that was never available to them. Hemp is achievable, it's circular, and the stories I hear from people in indigenous communities are incredibly inspiring, and I'm grateful.
Gratitude is the engine of love.
And love is the engine of the world. Speaking of love and gratitude, the next person I talked to was Ken Elliott, founder of I&D Hemp.
Well, I've been coming to NoCo for a while, and historically, there's a lot of cannabinoid talk, and a lot of folks showed up to talk about that and to embrace that or whatever they do, and that's not what we do. But this year and last year, I know Morris is trying to structure these things so that there's more and more and more on the grain and fiber, and I think Morris has done a really good job. But there's still a lot of folks that like the cannabinoids into things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. But there's a big group of us that don't do that, and we are focused on the grain and fiber, and so no, it was a good discussion, and there's great people out on the floor and bringing their stuff and talking shop. It's still awesome.
NoCo seems like such a cool event. I feel like it's full of just so many passionate people.
Yeah, it is. And you're surrounded by the mountains, Rocky Mountains. Every time I go to Colorado, it's like I feel like I'm a hobbit, far from home, far from the Shire. And last year when I arrived in Estes Park, it was like I was dropping into Rivendell.
Oh, could you hear the elves singing?
Almost. So after I talked to Ken, I called Jean Lotus. She's a hemp journalist and publisher of Hemp Build magazine. I was curious what she was excited about this year at NoCo.
I'm excited to see some progress in building materials. I have done some journalism about all kinds of hemp, cannabinoids, and paper and textiles, but for me, the building materials story is the most compelling, personally.
Yep.
I was excited to see they did a hempcrete demonstration. Sergei Kovolenkov and Gamal Jadu-Zalaquet from Cosmos did a hempcrete demonstration workshop, and then the Bish Enterprises had a little rollout decorticator.
What was her take on the optimism executive order discussion? Was she there for that?
Yes. Well, we got a very rosy picture from Bob Hogan, basically saying that he had been in the White House. And, he knows as well as everybody on that panel that there are basically some log jams with industrial hemp. Many log jams. Part of it is the pessimism of waiting for Congress to do anything about the Farm Bill. It's already late, right? It doesn't seem like a priority for them. So what he suggested was that an executive order about hemp might be the way to break the logjam. And obviously we're in a very new political situation where a lot of executive orders are just popping out, and nobody knows whether they are legit or whether Congress can stop them. He did point out that, Trump signed the original Farm Bill in 2018.
Right.
I do believe that conversation then really bifurcated as far as what the intent of the 2018 Farm Bill was, and a non-intoxicating path for hemp.
Right.
Which, of course, as Joy said, give some chemists a profit motive and marijuana and cannabis, and they're going to figure out all kinds of things. So nobody knew about all the various CBD H and CBD ABC and all this other crap at the time, but that has proved to be a profit center. And so much so that now even the regular cannabis companies are angry at the hemp industry. And and also, unfortunately, the CDC has a special little category for children, and the Poison Control Center has a special little category for children who've taken Delta 8 gummies and are now in the hospital.
Yeah.
So, it is a Wild West, and especially in prohibition states like Florida, Tennessee, the Southeast, there are people who are just selling some kind of vape cart or some kind of edible that has zero gates on it of any kind.
Right. And they use the word hemp.
So that kind of tars, as you know, I think we've talked about this. My personal motto is make hemp boring again.
We have a similar motto over here. It's, hemp, big, boring, and ubiquitous. That's our goal. So similar. Exactly. Yeah. Just different t-shirts, but same bumper sticker.
I do hear what you're saying about hemp needing to be boring, but I feel like there's so much about industrial hemp to get excited about. Like, for me, and I feel like for my generation, we don't even know that this industry exists. I don't know that you can build houses or make plastic, much less sequester carbon and clean the soil, all with a plant. I think everyone just thinks of it as weed. So there's so much work to do, and only now am I really starting to understand what's at stake in the battle for the soul of the hemp industry. But do we really have t-shirts and bumper stickers?
I hear what you're saying on all of that, and that's amazing. You make a lot of good points there. There is a lot of work to do. The bumper stickers and t-shirts are kind of imaginary, and we keep them in that big room with all the doors.
Okay. Well, anyway, I do notice that everyone you've talked to so far seems to agree on things, but I take there's got to be another side of the argument, or at least a different opinion. Did you talk to anyone on the cannabinoid side?
I appreciate you, Sophia.
Thanks.
Yeah, as you can imagine, I have lots of connections on the fiber and grain side of things, but at this point, not so many out in cannabinoid land. But I am fortunate to know Chris Fonts. I interviewed him originally back in 2019, and I enjoy talking to him when I see him at NoCo.
Who is he? How's he connected to the cannabinoid side?
Yeah, Chris Fonts, he's the founder and CEO of High Spirits Beverage. It's a cannabis beverage company, but he's involved in a whole lot of other things and has been for a while now.
So was an early pioneer of the hemp-derived Delta-9 category under our brand Trojan Horse Cannabis, which is now being absorbed into High Spirits.
Okay.
But on top of that, I'm quite involved in regulatory work and in lobbying and trade associations and such. So I'm the president of the U.S. Hemp Authority.
Okay.
We're a third-party nonprofit accreditation system that we use in a certified body an accredited certified body to certify hemp products, both non-impairing and adult use products, in lieu essentially of FDA regulations to ensure that these things are made safe and their label claims are accurate. On top of that, I'm on the board of directors for U.S. Hemp Roundtable, strategic advisor to Hemp Beverage Alliance, and interface with multiple other trade associations, all with the goal of moving this ball forward and getting some stable, secure regulations for consumers and industry.
How does he feel about the term intoxicating cannabinoids? Does it rub him the wrong way?
Look, at the end of the day, I think it's an inaccurate term. and it's often used with derogatory intent. And so that's the only reason the term frustrates me. It's not technically accurate and it's often derogatory, but at the end of the day, I want to use vernacular that makes sense to the people I'm talking to.
Okay.
So if I'm talking to a group of people that understand this to be intoxicating hemp, then I'll say intoxicating hemp in front of those folks, just so we could sit and argue vernacular and syntax all day, but that doesn't move the needle forward. And so I try to avoid, sometimes on LinkedIn, I'll get into these little, like, here's my opinion on this, but really the goal is to move the needle, and arguing semantics over language right now isn't helpful. We have a lot of bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll linger on that a little bit. So why are so many people kind of bent out of shape about intoxicating hemp?
You have several groups that I would say are antagonistic towards the space. The first group we'll say is internal. It's hemp folk that are focused primarily on industrial, and they think that doing what we're doing in the hemp space is not true to the intent of where all this was going originally, which is very, partly true, more true from 2014, less true 2018. But they feel like we're sucking all the wind out of the room because no one wants to talk industrial. We all want to talk about THC, and that's a fair frustration. But I don't think it requires the shutting down or the anger towards our side of the fence. But that's one group. Another group that's pretty adamant against these things are the marijuana companies. And obviously not all of them. In fact, a good portion of these multi-state operators have now jumped into the hemp space and are now selling hemp products and making hemp products themselves. But there's still a bunch of folks out there in the marijuana space that do not want to see hemp succeed. And I understand where they're coming from. And a lot of this is coming from dispensary owners and folks that have invested into the dispensary. Or their business model is banking on a limited license system with vertical integration requirements. And so this national free market is very scary to them. And then the third group is just your general reefer madness folks that don't like marijuana or quote unquote intoxicating hemp. They just don't want to see anybody having fun, and it makes them angry. So that's how I would describe the factions.
All right, fair assessment. You mentioned in there that the fiber and grain folks are maybe upset because people want to keep talking about THC. Is that because that's where the money is?
Yes, I think it's, by volume of the industry, the cannabinoid side of hemp right now is massively outpacing the industrial side. Now, we know that's not long term. Once the industrial side is firing on all cylinders, it will make our side of the space look infinitesimally small. But it's a huge, it's just massive industry that needs to be built. And we're still in the infant stages. And frankly, we're talking about both with fiber and with grain, you're looking at products that are already globally commoditized. And so the price is already on the floor. And when you're trying to start a new crop in an expensive country, relatively speaking, like the US, and you're trying to compete with inexpensive commodities from other countries, you really only succeed if you get to scale. Between here and full scale is just pain until we get there.
He sounds really smart.
Yeah, he is. And he mentioned like the energy on the floor, how high the spirits were at the show.
The optimism on the floor right now is some of the best I've seen at a NoCo. And on top of that, we've got this general consensus and this recurring theme through multiple conversations about let's stop focusing on what we all disagree on and let's start focusing what we agree on.
List them off for me. What do we all agree on?
I think generally speaking, everyone agrees that industrial hemp should be at full scale here in the country and has an opportunity to quite literally save the planet. I think we all agree on that. I think we all agree that adults should be allowed to make the decision to purchase impairing products at their discretion and use at their discretion. And I think those folks, I think we also all agree that those folks have the right and requirement to trust what is in the package is what is on the package. So the label matches the contents, and these products are safe for consumption. We need integrity. We need regulations. We want adults to have access to these things. We want non-impairing products to be available to everybody. And we want the industrial side of this plant to revolutionize our environment and how we do things. And I think everyone agrees on all of that. The question is, how do we get from A to B, and what detours are taken and what paths are taken, and the sacrifices on the way and the nuance that we all disagree on. But if we can focus on those core things, we'll really get something well done.
Amen to that.
Did he mention the Bob Hoban executive order stuff?
Bob's presentation was primarily based around this fact that hemp is here to stay, and we're going to see, it's very likely and extremely probable that this quote-unquote loophole is not a loophole and is going to get further stabilized and solidified. There's a lot of different methodologies for how that can happen. And in this day and age, it's, making predictions on that is very difficult and probably foolish. But there's many vehicles that could work for this, and we think it's likely it's going to happen within the next several months to between now and the end of the year.
And then I called Andrew Bish from the Hemp Feed Coalition.
I guess I've got some firsthand knowledge relative to some of the optimism around a potential executive order or at least some directive.
Wait, is that something you can talk about?
Well, I mean, I can say that some of the individuals that are having these conversations, I've talked to personally. I definitely was heavy in talking about what we're doing at the Hemp Feed Coalition and how important I think that work is relative to national policy. I think that there's a real possibility that something positive could be coming for the hemp industry. At the same time, I've worked with people in the government for a long time, and I know that the things that you hope are going to happen quickly are oftentimes the things that don't. So, yeah, I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic, but there is a reasonable likelihood that this could come to pass, what Bob Hoban was talking about.
So maybe more than just glitter farting unicorns?
Maybe.
I asked Andy what executive order he would write if he was in the White House.
I would correct what happened in 1958 and give grass status to hemp as animal feed. That's what I would do. It doesn't solve all the problems because it doesn't, by grass status, while it does make it potentially legal, it doesn't necessarily indicate how much you should feed an animal, what's healthy, what's not healthy. So that means the industry itself would have to do some work, but at least it would make it for a more open marketplace, and investment could go where investment wants to go. So that's what I would do. I'd correct the mistake that was made in 1958.
What is grass status?
It's an acronym that stands for Generally Recognized as Safe. It was established in 1958. It was part of the Food Additives Amendment to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, allowing certain ingredients to bypass FDA pre-approval if deemed safe by experts. But because hemp was effectively banned during that time, it never received GRAS recognition, which still limits its use in food products today and really, really kind of messes things up for hemp as a livestock feed.
It's so fascinating how everything is contingent on everything else.
Yeah, a lot has happened to get us where we are now.
Hemp is more than you think.
Finally, my last call was with Greg Wilson from Hempwood, who maintains a special kind of wisdom that really resonates with me.
So I went to less of the event than I traditionally do. I just came in to speak on the Fiber Day on Saturday to try to steer clear of the whole controversy or what's going on between floral and grain and fiber. I just come and talk to my people rather than fight a fight I don't need to be involved with. I know there's some conflict between the different uses of the plant, especially when it comes to intoxicants. And as a company and as a person, we do not publicly take sides on this and say, hey, you shouldn't do this, but we do believe that they should be regulated separately. We're not against people doing what they do. I just don't want to infringe on what I do.
Greg definitely has a point, and it puts kind of a nice bow on the situation. So, what's the solution?
Well, judging from the chatter at NoCo, it could be solved by decree here in the next few weeks or months. But is waiting for someone else to solve our problems really the best strategy?
I mean, that's not how I was raised.
Yeah, me neither. The solution here is something I think we addressed in the beginning of the show.
Language.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about this for a really long time now. And for me, it's simple. Words matter. What we call things matters. So here's my proposal.
Let's hear it.
All right. So, I'm a simpleton. I'll say that. But let's use the word hemp to mean the plant that we grow for fiber, grain, herd, seed, oil, etc. The raw materials of tangible things.
All right. So you're talking about using the historical definition of the word hemp. But what about the cannabinoids?
Well, let's call anything having to do with the floral material, regardless of THC content, let's call all of it cannabis.
But isn't it all cannabis? Like hemp is cannabis, but not all cannabis is hemp?
Kind of like how a square is a rectangle and a rectangle's not a square?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, but that's the argument that people make. Oh, it's all cannabis. But hear me out on this. It's all cannabis sativa L. That's its name, according to history and science. And interestingly, the word sativa here means useful. So, yeah, we know that hemp is also cannabis. That's what it's called around the world. It's all cannabis. But in English, we have this very useful, convenient, linguistic distinction. And I think we should adhere to it. We should lean into that. It would make everything so much easier. And I mean, it would make talking about policy and regulation a lot simpler, and that would lead to making it easier for farmers to grow industrial hemp. That would make it easier for the industry to scale to the point where, it can make the difference that we all know it can.
Eric, do you remember Treebeard?
Treebeard from Fangorn Forest in Middle-earth? Yeah. Yeah, of course I do. Who doesn't?
Well, because what you're talking about here reminds me of something that he said in The Lord of the Rings. He said, real names tell you the story of things they belong to. And what you're saying sounds like common sense to me.
Well, yeah, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, but if it was, it would be probably getting defunded.
Ouch. Too soon, maybe? But if anyone in the Trump administration is listening to this is the way forward. Make the regulatory split between the floral material and the industrial material.
Have you thought about any, unintended consequences to that split?
That's a great question. Maybe we can pick up on that in a future episode.
In the meantime, though, if anyone out there in Hempland has strong opinions about Eric's simple linguistic solution, or anything else you heard on today's show, send us an email at podcast@lancasterfarming.com.
All right, well, that does it for us. NoCo 2025 in the bag.
It definitely went to 11 this year.
Yeah, well, thanks to everyone for listening to the show, and thanks to our guests who went on this journey there and back again with me. JJ, Kelly, Joe, Ken, Morris, Joy, Dion, Ken, Gene, Chris, Andrew, and Greg. Thank you so much. My name is Eric Hurlock.
And I'm Sophia Kurzius.
And until next time,
we'll see you in the newspaper. This episode is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Hurlock, Sophia Kurzius, and Justin Berker. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.